Hi everyone and welcome. So today I'm going to go over all the books that I read in July. And I already touched upon this in my August TBR video, but July is a little bit shameful for me to wrap up because I thought that I was going to read a lot during my staycation of 3 weeks, and you can already see that in my July TBR video where I talk about a lot of books that I was going to get to. Now it's even more shameful for me if you follow me on Instagram because I uploaded an Instagram stories there, and I think this is the picture where I said these are the books that I'm going to read during my staycation. So 20-ish books. Now, in the end, I managed to read 4 books in July, so that's a little bit less. And 3 of those were physical reads because I knew that I wasn't going to listen to a lot of audiobooks when I'm not in the car driving to work. 1 was an audiobook, and then in the first week of August, I actually finished 1 more audiobook. So I am going to talk about 5 books today. Now, of those 5, 2 were conclusions of series, so I'm quite happy with that. 1 was a continuation of a series, quite happy with that as well. Then 2 others were starts of series, but 1 you can read as a standalone, so that's quite okay. Of the 5 books, 4 were adult fantasy, of course, and then 1 was adult sci-fi. Now I also DNF'd 1 book, so it's sort of a DNF because I think that I'm going to pick it up later, but for now it's one that I just wasn't in the right headspace for, so it's a DNF and I will talk about that at the end of the video. But without further ado, let's go over the books that I picked up in July in a chronological order. And the first book that I finished in July was an audiobook, and that is Fool's Fate by Robin Hobb. Don't really need to say a lot about it, I guess. This is the conclusion of the Tawny Man trilogy, which is the 3rd trilogy in the Realm of the Elderling series. I've loved this entire series. Almost all of them are all-time favorites, and this one is my favorite up to date. So that means quite a lot, I guess. Now, I think that there are a lot of similarities between the Farseer trilogy and then this one. So in the last book, like the Farseer trilogy, you have a quest and you have a lot of traveling. And that does mean that it can be slow and a lot of people don't like it, but I don't mind slow when it's with Fitz and when it's with Robin Hobb's beautiful prose, so I didn't mind that. I must say that here the landscape, it's quite cold, there's a lot of snow, and that's something that I typically don't really like. I like it more when you have a forest-like setting, for example, so that's maybe a little bit of a negative for me, but because it was so well developed and explored, I didn't even mind for this one. And it had just some of the most amazing moments that I've ever seen. People who met each other again that I was waiting for since the Farseer trilogy, and it happened here. So I think that this is an amazing conclusion. I couldn't hope for a better ending in this trilogy. So can't wait to continue with the Realm of the Elderlings, but at the other hand, I want to wait a little bit more. I think that I will start with the Rainwild Chronicles in 2022 because I don't want to end the series too soon and I want to take my time with it. But an amazing start of the month. Then after that, I read Dune by Frank Herbert. So this was a buddy read together with Lauren from the Paperback Empire. And I'm not going to say too much about this one because I have a spoiler-free vlog where I am reading Dune, and I will link that in the cards up above. But I actually really enjoyed it. I was scared to start this one because it's definitely dense and it's very slow, I must say that. When you know the premise, well, it takes around 200 pages to get to the premise. And I know that a lot of people don't really like that. I actually enjoy that because it takes your attention away from the plot and focuses it on the characters, the relationship, the world building. And I think for this book that was actually a good decision because there's quite a lot of world building, you have quite a bit of info dumping in the beginning, so I actually like that. Also the writing style, a lot of people say that it's archaic, but I'm not a native English speaker and I just love this. I think that the writing style here is probably one of my biggest positives that I have to say about the book. And then the main character, I thought he was very interesting. And this is why, even though I see it as a standalone for now, I actually really want to continue with the series because I want to see what happens with the characters that we've come to know in the first one next. So I was actually really happy that I liked this one. After that, I picked up another physical read, and that was Beyond Redemption by Michael R. Fletcher. Now, I do have a spoiler-filled discussion together with the author over on Steve's channel that I will link down below. But for my spoiler-free thoughts, I must say this is the darkest book that I've read, and this is actually number 1 on the Grim Dark list over on Mark Lawrence's blog, if I'm not mistaken. So definitely know that if you want to go in. This is probably the limit of what I can enjoy in terms of bleakness and darkness. I don't really care for gore or gutter, or in terms of I don't care, I mean, I don't mind that and I actually like that, and the darker the better, but this is just bleak. Up to a point where this world is so bleak that the characters that you follow don't really do anything redeemable. In most grimdark that I've read, you also have characters that are very grey, but they do redeemable stuff, you can like them towards the end. In this one, it's very difficult to like the main characters. And I can like that and I can go into that mind space, but it's very taxing, and it's definitely not something that I would read from, multiple books a month of, because that would be a little bit too much for me. I think that the biggest plus here is definitely the magic system and the world building, because in this world of manifested delusions, insanity shapes reality. So you have people with mental disorders, and when these mental disorders become worse and worse and worse, in the end, this can shape reality. For example, you have mirrorists in this world, and they look in the mirror, they see their reflection, but in their case, the reflection is actually real. It can do stuff, it can become reality, and in that way also shape the lives of other people. When this reflection becomes stronger as the person progresses in their insanity, this can also become dangerous for the person itself. So that's very interesting to read about and just to think about a little bit. So that's why I want to definitely continue with the trilogy, and I am going to read the second book this month, but man, it's dark. So if you want to dip your toes into grimdark, don't start with this book, start with First Law or something like that. If you like grimdark and if you want to read some of the darkest stuff out there, I think that this is a good one. Even though I'm not well read in grimdark by any way, shape or form, a lot of people who are do tell me that this is definitely one on the darker end. After that, I made some progress in the Faithful and the Fallen series by John Gwynne, and I read the third book, Ruin. Now, I do have a spoiler-filled discussion with some other booktubers that I will link below, but my spoiler-free thoughts are that I'm a little bit disappointed. So I did love Malice and Valor, which are the first two books in the series, and love is a strong word. I liked them. I could see that it was traditional fantasy, nothing really special, but from time to time, I quite liked that story. However, this one was a disappointment. It was just battle scene after battle scene, where the battle scene just didn't really mean anything because you didn't really have time to think about what the consequences were. This is also a plot-driven book to the max. I think this is the most plot-driven series that I've ever read, where the characters are doing what they are doing. Why? To just push the plot forward. And that's something that I don't like at all. I can see why people who love the series think that this book is the best one, because it gives the most plot and it gives the most battle scenes. But for me, that's something that I don't like. So that's why, for me, it was a disappointment. However, the last 100 pages or so were pretty epic, and I did like that, and where the characters are at this pace or at this time in the series. And because of that, I am quite interested to see what happens in Rat and how the series gets basically towards the end and what will happen there. But I can already tell that it's just not my type of series. And maybe if I read it a little bit slower with more months in between, I would have liked it more. But if it's not your thing, it's not your thing. Unfortunately, not everything can be an all-time favorite. Then the last book that I read in completion, this is actually one that I finished in August. That is the audiobook for The Burning God by R.F. Kuang, the last book in the Poppy War trilogy. Now, I'm not going to go too deeply into my thoughts because I am planning to do a non-spoiler review for the entire trilogy, but I really liked the ending here, to be honest. I know that it's very divisive among fans, and I can see why, but to me, how this ended really added a lot to the character arc of Rin from the beginning in the Poppy War towards the end, and it really shone a light on the consequences of war and what it can do to people. So I really liked what the author did with this entire trilogy. I must say that the beginning of this book was a little bit too much military fantasy for me. I don't really like that much, and that was a lot in the first half of this book, and definitely also in the second book of the series. So it's not an all-time favorite series for me, but I do think that it's very good, and I would basically recommend it to anybody who likes grimdark fantasy and who thinks that this is an interesting plot. I would also say that if you read the first book and you think that it's a little bit YA, keep reading because it's definitely not. So again, one that I actually really enjoyed and a conclusion of a series again. Very proud of myself. And then unfortunately my DNF of the month, and that is The Black Tongue Thief by Christopher Buehlman. So this is the first one in an epic fantasy series, but it's a new release, so only the first one is out at this moment. And I DNF'd it because I just wasn't in the right headspace. There's a lot of humor in this one. I thought it was going to be grimdark. It's not. I do think that it's very interesting. It's a unique book, and especially the humor in this one is different than anything else that I've read in fantasy, and it actually appealed to me. I know that this humor wouldn't be fitting for everyone. To me, I quite liked it, but I was around 150 pages in and I realized that other than that, I couldn't really feel invested in the story, feel invested in the main characters, or basically what was going to happen. I also thought that sometimes the author gave a lot of notice or a lot of time on things that I just didn't care about. For example, how coins looked or what was depicted on these coins. I don't really care. So sometimes I was just pulled out of the story because of that. On the other hand, Stacy over at Stacy's all booked, really loves this book. It's one of her favorite books of the year so far. So I feel like I should give it another chance. Maybe when I'm a little bit calmed down with all the read-alongs and I can really take my time with it, that's when I'm going to pick it up again and see if I like it a little bit better then. So those were all of the books that I read in July. Please let me know what your favorite read of the month was and if you would recommend it to me or not. Also, please let me know if you are the kind of person who can read a lot during a holiday. Maybe you bring a book with you when you're going somewhere, or are you like me and do you want to read a lot, but then in the end you just don't because you're doing other things? Let me know in the comments down below. As always, I hope that you enjoyed the video and see you next time. Bye!